You're listening to the Fairness Doctrine on the Cyberstation USA Radio Network. If you want to take part in the conversation, 617-328-3526, or you can send us an email any time of the day or night, fairnessdoctrineradio@gmail.com. And now back to Chuck and Patrick. Chuck, take it away.
Thank you, Lars. Chuck Morse along with Dr. Patrick O'Heffernan. Our guest this segment is Dr. Judith Reisman, the author of Sexual Sabotage, How One Mad Scientist Unleashed a Plague of Corruption and Contagion on America. Judith, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Chuck. I'm always happy to be chatting with both of you.
Judith, your book is obviously about sexologist Alfred Kinsey, who I think you document quite well, was a pervert and was a very sick individual who put together these very corrupt and false studies that promoted the idea of what Sigmund Freud called polymorphous perversity as an ultimate good. That being sex with anyone at any time, anywhere, in any situation is the ultimate virtue, and that those who disagree with that are repressed. That was Freud's premise, and that was what was adopted by Kinsey, that there's something mentally wrong with us who have put value on sexual relations and who want to look at them as something sacred, not something that just should be the equivalent of what communist writer Alexandra Kollontai referred to as the equivalent of having a glass of water. But yet what particularly bothers me about the Kinsey phenomena, the Kinsey Institute at University of Indiana, was the fact that it was so vigorously promoted by America's corporate elites, particularly the Rockefellers, who funded it, who promoted it, and then by America's corporate media, Time Magazine, Newsweek, the New York Times, giving this prominent display month after month, year after year, with front-page pictures of Kinsey, making this despicable pervert look like some kind of a grandfatherly figure, talking about him as being a legitimate academic and as a scientist, and how this process continued with its acceptance and promotion by our corporate elites to the degree that it entered into our court system and eventually was the basis upon which many judicial decisions were adjudicated. My question is, why is that? Why would our corporations back such a thing? And when they did they do it consciously? Were they aware of who Kinsey actually was?
Well, we know that the Rockefeller Foundation, the leadership within the Rockefeller Foundation that were in charge of giving him this money and this support and this massive mass media blitzkrieg, it was like a Disney, a Disney film coming. Well, what's this one there? All the kids watch now. This little guy, I've forgotten his name. Harry Potter, right? Sure. It was sort of like a Harry Potter blitz. The only thing we didn't have were the T-shirts, and little banners. So, but of course that was back in '48. Yeah. So yeah, they knew. We have that on record that at a certain point, one of the head honcho at the Rockefeller Foundation, who was in charge of the scientific analyses, wrote and complained. He said, "This man doesn't know anything about statistics." He said. He says, I think he's collecting pornography, and he said, and what are we doing funding him? Why are we supporting him? There's nothing scientific going on here at all. And he was, the gentleman was simply promoted up the ladder and replaced by someone else who would not question their funding of the Kinsey data. And then their shift with their money, the Rockefellers shifted their money from Kinsey directly right smack dab into creation of the legal system that would change our laws, the American Law Institute Model Penal Code. So yes, they knew full well every single thing that they were doing, and those who objected within the Rockefeller Foundation system were removed, given quote-unquote better slots, if you will.
Well, now, Judith, I think you document this very well. I don't think it's really questionable up for question that this is exactly how things transpired. My question is why? Why would the Rockefellers? I know that they were very involved in the so-called progressive Darwinian eugenics movement before World War II. There's no question about that. Also very well documented, a big progressive cause. But Kinsey came after World War II. I mean, this was 1947. when the release of Sexuality in the American Male and then 1952 Sexuality in the American Female. Why did they do this, knowing, or at least having some inkling, that this stuff was cooked it was false data, and that it was promoting something that really was not a reflection of American life?
Well, I unfortunately, I wasn't privy to the personal diaries, of the Rockefellers, but we do know certain things. We know that this was a eugenic belief system within the Rockefeller world. These are elitists who really did not believe that those of us little people down here had kind of a right, to breathe the same air. And so they were very much involved in the eugenics promotion, as was Kinsey, and as were so many of their people that they were supporting. And of course, there's a great deal of on my website. I have an interview with Dr. Dobbs, I think it's Dobson.
Yes.
Oh, well, anyway, who was who was involved right then with the Reese Committee in investigating why,
Norman Dobbs,
why. Thank you, Norman Dobbs. And they were investigating why would Rockefeller and Carnegie and Ford all be involved in the promotion really of anti-American activities that would help to cripple this country. And so there's a lot of information there that Norman Dodd had personal interviews with these folks and that he reports on. So all I can say to that is I urge people to go and listen to Dodd. It's an amazing thing that we have that interview right now, and he comes closer to telling us what was going on. But what was going on then, Chuck, and what was going on then, Patrick, is going on now. And that's the thing, is that it has never stopped. It has just picked up, its pace. And right now, I got in touch with you folks to talk about the fact that University of Minnesota has now got a special inaugural slot there in honor of Eli Coleman, who's sort of running what they call their sexual health program. And this is honoring John Money, who's involved in the Journal of Pedophilia. This is honoring, and it's being funded by pornographers, by the Adam and Eve people. I just was looking at their funding agencies, Sinclair, which is another pornography group, Candida Royale, who's a pornographic performer, and so forth, and of course SICUS, Sex Information Education Council of the United States. So these people then, believers, true believers,
right,
in the Kinsey fraud, have been perpetuating the sexual dysfunction en masse, and then, to answer sort of your question a little bit, doesn't surprise me that Big Pharma is funding these people too, because all the dysfunctions that we have are funding Big Pharma that makes a fortune for Big Pharma.
Yeah, they step in and they get to provide the drugs for people's depression and physical ailments and ruined lives. But Judith,
and impotence, of course.
You bet. Have you contacted the University of Minnesota and asked them about this?
No, I haven't yet, but I certainly have been reading their material and reading their inaugural information and their list of their funders and so forth. And they are not atypical. I mean, this has been going on for years. Our sex education structure has for years. Well, come on. They've been educating their people with pornography all along. They never denied it. They call it the SAR, Sexual Attitude Restructuring Program, and they say that they also refer to it as an FU whatever erama, right?
Right.
And so they've been educating, quote unquote, your sexologists with pornography, hardcore vicious, and some of it was child pornography before they kind of got shut down on that one.
Kinsey was the father of that.
Well, yes, indeed, and they've never stopped. They have not stopped.
And also, Dr. John Money was one of the innovators of this idea of changing a young person's sex at a very young
operation.
Exactly, and we're talking about at a very young age, a prepubescent, changing sexual identity.
Well, and John Money appears in the Journal of Pedophilia, Journal of Pedophilia, which is a journal that is written for pedophiles, by pedophiles, and John Money is interviewed in there, and he says he wants to end age of consent, and he says there's nothing wrong with kids having sex with adults. And then he also says that if there's a violent sadomasochistic abuse situation and one of you dies, I can assure you it's the boy, not the man, that ought to be perhaps considered legal because, quote-unquote, consent was involved. Now, that you're having an inaugural lectureship named for this guy in an institute that is training human sexuality experts that go global and tell the world what is healthy human sexuality. I think we have a problem.
Sounds like the new civil rights movement. Patrick, let me welcome you aboard. Patrick?
Well, thank you very much.
I was wondering.
Here he is.
Chuck's hosting today. We trade for our Blog Talk listeners who are new to the show. Chuck and I trade off hosting, and it's kind of random. So Chuck's hosting today, and we're always very deferential to one another when we host. Judith, well, first of all, the funding by outside organizations of graduate students, lectureships, etc., is a long-established custom within the university community. The Koch brothers are funding graduate students and a program at UCLA.
The Saudis do that.
To teach conservative principles and love for business rather than democracy. But this one kind of bothers me a little bit. Could you tell me a little bit about, is there a curriculum involved, Judith?
Well, I think it's the standard sex ed curriculum, and that standard sex ed curriculum would include the Kinsey research, the viability of that. It would include, of course, the notion that sex education requires a recognition of non-gender specific, that you can be born this way, and that's perfectly all right, one way or another. It's sort of the standard stuff that's being taught at the Institute of Advanced Study of Human Sexuality in San Francisco, at Northridge, and yes, the curriculum would absolutely include, depending upon how many hours you're taking, how high a level of achievement you're looking for, would definitely include extensive pornography consumption. Now, that is where we get into some real problems.
Mean that you would review it in order to critique it.
Well, you use it. Yeah, you sit there and you watch it. There's no indication anywhere of any of the materials that I have ever read coming out of the Institute that they consider any problem associated with pornography of any type whatsoever. So if there is a critique per se, maybe it's that they should have had, more of it, better tone. I've seen nothing like that, and there's nothing like that in their curricula.
Can you cite some articles in which people who have been through this program have reviewed pornography and written articles saying that there ought to be more and better of it?
I can cite, let's see, well, they all kind of support it. I'm trying to think offhand. There should be some information about that in my book, but yeah.
There's a lot on the website.
Oh, yeah, right.
Many
There's
articles.
a lot of it on the website, lots of articles. And also they appear in court cases, and in legislative. Oh, and of course the head of the Kinsey, of the Institute of the Advanced Study of Human Sexuality was Wardell Palmer. He died a little while ago, and he was Kinsey's co-author, and he appeared, I quote about him in Happy Day, where he appears before the Adult Video Association and requests the ability to get money from them to produce filmed child pornography because they only have the print stuff, and I have one of their books, Meditations on the Gift of Sexuality, which is photographs of the staff, the students, the faculty, all engaged in various forms of sodomy and various forms of sexual activity together. The Meditations on the Gift of Sexuality.
Wait, can we stop there for a second? You're saying that he published a book with photographs of his staff and his students having sex?
Yeah, it's published by the Institute of the Advanced Study of Human Sexuality in San Francisco. It's a 1977 book. The photographs are quite vivid and quite clear.
What's the name of the book?
As a matter of fact, one Meditations on, I urge people to try and get it, on the gift of sexuality. And it has, it's got a lot of biblical sort of quote, surrounding the sexual congress that's taking place. It was all illegal, of course. And none of that was legal at the time, but that didn't seem to bother anybody. And then part of the photographs from this book, again, are child pornography, and these photographs, the child pornography, were sold by the Institute of Advanced Study of Human Sexuality to Hustler magazine, to as in an article that they did, which was authored by one of their faculty members, in an article on why we needed to end age of consent.
Okay, well, Judith, sit right tight. We're going to take a break. No, and we will.
About that.
Not at all. This is tremendous. We'll be right back. Judith Reisman, Fairness Doctrine.
You're listening to the Fairness Doctrine on the Cyberstation USA Radio Network. If you'd like to take part in the conversation, 617-328-3526. You can also shoot us an email any time of the day or night, fairnessdoctrineradio@gmail.com. And now back to Chuck and Patrick. Chuck, take it away.
Thank you. And Judith, you're answering Patrick's question with regard to documenting the support for the Kinsey Institute and the sexologists have had for the pornography industry going all the way back from 1947 right up till today.
Yeah. So this was the Wardell Pomeroy was the acting dean at the Institute of Advanced Study of Human Sexuality in San Francisco. And in his position as acting dean, was calling for the funds to make the filming of child pornography. But, of course, the Adult Video Association did not seem to think it was in their interest to do that at the time. But they do continue, and they did continue to produce their own pornography for years and years. As far as I know, they still do.
Right.
So it's not a question of, of so to speak, critiquing it, Patrick. It's the belief that this is healthy and used and valuable. And the SICA, Sex Information Education Council of the United States, that supports this the curriculum in Minnesota. They have printed in their own materials several times that for children to learn about human sexuality, that's sexually graphic and explicit material, is extremely valuable for them, that they can learn about how to do, neat stuff that way. It goes on and on. There is no end to the promotion of pornography as a viable form of human sexuality.
Judith, I recently was listening to a left-wing radio program here in Boston, Revolution Radio, where they had someone on from SICUS. They think that conservatives don't listen to this. And most, I happened to check this out, and they said exactly what you're saying. All this exposure to sexuality is good for young children and pre-adolescent children. They don't quite say why it's good, but they imply that those who disagree with this are somehow mentally ill or ignorant. Patrick, we really should have someone from SICUS, and you're the person that needs to ask them to come on this show.
I disagree with them, too, on that particular point. But
the important thing is that this is being taught at the school level.
Yes, exactly.
I have posters in my files, that show children. I won't say it because it's a family. It's a family show. But they took the 10 Commandments down from the schools because the Supremes were afraid that it would impact people and the kids and they would
because it violates the First Amendment. There's a difference. There's no First Amendment about sexology in the Constitution.
No. Just a minute. No. I'm quoting something, paraphrasing it, but it was no. Why? We're going to get into the First Amendment, but you took that down, and now you've put up the AIDS posters, and you've put up posters that show kids how to clean their needles and how to put on various condoms in very graphic ways. So where's the First Amendment there?
No, but philosophically, Patrick, let me put aside the Constitution, which is, of course, many different opinions could look at this.
Many different
philosophically,
opinions.
Thank you, Patrick. Philosophically, putting aside, putting aside the First Amendment, philosophically, the left views the idea of being exposed, and I've talked to many leftists for years on this, being exposed to things like the 10 Commandments is somehow psychologically damaging to young people, whereas the SICUS, which, by the way, the main purpose of SICUS and their mission is as a group that founds education for young people, including elementary school children, and that it was SICUS that basically practically invented sex education in 1965 after they came back from the UN Conference on Family in Hamburg, Germany, and that Philip Reif, who was one of the founders of SICUS, I don't know if he's on the letterhead. We've talked about this, but he's viewed as the guru of sex education, wrote in his book, which was Beyond, what was it? Faith After Freud, The Triumph of the Therapeutic,
Right.
that, and this gets into why I think the Rockefellers are into this. He talks about sex education replacing the authority of the family with that of the state, and he gets into a lot of this language. By the way, Philip Reif's son is a psychologist who continues this. We should try to get him on, Patrick.
Okay, we have an email.
Yeah, please.
And this is from Jax Jill, and the question is for Judith, and she asks, what does the course teach that is different from courses taught in med school regarding sexual dysfunction? And I don't know what they teach in med school. Maybe you do.
Well, actually, med schools were some of the first lines of attack by the sex industry, by SICUS and even Planned Parenthood at the time. And because our doctors were the most conservative in way back, in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and the doctors were extremely conservative, so they did not in any way, shape, or form encourage promiscuity. They wanted everybody to sort of keep it together till they got married. That they said that would lower the, AIDS. Well, we didn't have AIDS, but STDs and other kinds of dysfunctions, and then it was very important for children and all that sort of thing. So the first line of attack was to go and to bring pornography into the medical schools and to train our medical people with pornography, telling them, and they were all young, novices too coming into this thing, to tell them that this you have to watch the pornography because your patients will have these problems, and therefore you have to be sensitive to those problems. So you sit down and you get aroused to the pornography. Now, one of the big problems we have with pornography is the huge denial on the part of the people who use it that it affects them. They like to show it to all the students, and they use it on their own as well, and they'll talk about that on different occasions, but they all want to pretend that it affects everybody else, but it has no effect whatsoever on them, and that is exactly, of course.
What does the medical literature say on the effect of pornography? Because I don't know. It's an honest question.
No, I don't think we have anything at this point in time with the medical literature. We had, in the past, a very strong position on promiscuity in any way, or even any kind of pictures, that it wasn't a good thing. Then we got re-educated our medical people, and I don't know that our medical people have more recently taken a more sane approach. There've been a couple of books out by various folks who have identified pornography as harmful, but they tend to be classified as conservative. And not only that, but remember this, Patrick, originally when sex educators went into our schools, they were going to help us become more, the whole point was to lower venereal disease rates, to lower pregnancy rates, to lower our divorce rates and so forth. Of course, everything's gone off the charts since they've been in and helping us. But they originally started all this.
I don't think you can say that's why divorce rates have gone up.
I'm just, let me finish one. But when they originally went into this, and this goes to your point, Patrick, they walked into the classrooms and they said they were going to be teaching safe sex. Okay. Well, the sex wasn't safe. When you tell children to have sex, as I, have the brochures, have sex with your friends, that was called, that's the one that the 6th and 7th grade, and they called it in those years in the 1974, was being published by Planned Parenthood, and they were telling the children that they should have sex with their friends, and if she's drunk, you should ask her, if she's too young, you should ask her, if you want a virgin to marry, buy one. There are girls who have freely chosen that business. Marriage is the price you'll pay. You get the virgin very temporarily. So they had to shift eventually from saying safe sex, because it wasn't safe at all, to saying safer sex, and that still wasn't particularly safe. And so now we have a massive increase. Look, the more you have sex with people that you aren't married to, guess what? The more you have venereal diseases and the more you have pregnancies that you don't really want to have and that sort of thing. I mean, those are common sense observations that people have been stripped of when they've been listening to the so-called experts who are telling them that it's untrue. It's ludicrous.
Plus, obviously, such quaint and old-fashioned ideas as objective notions of morality aren't even discussed, because in polite company, people who might hold such ideas are mentally ill and are people who should not be listened to.
Well, look here, Chuck, Patrick, come on. Morality. What do we mean by morality? When we talk about morality, what we're talking about is the stuff that's going to help to keep you healthier and to keep the society healthier. If you're having sex with 25 guys, you're not going to be healthier than if you have sex with somebody who is a virgin and you're a virgin and you get married and the two of you have sex with each other. Guess what? You don't get venereal disease. I know it's a shock, but
Judith,
it's true.
But Judith, this goes against left-wing commentator, 60s French hero Jacques Derrida, the father of deconstructionism, who said that such notions as morality depend upon those who possess them, and no one has a right to say what is moral to someone else. Doesn't matter if you're Jeffrey Dahmer and you're cutting up children and putting them in your refrigerator. If you think it's moral, and anyone who disagrees, there's something mentally wrong with them. But anyway, I think we're going to a break. We'll be right back. Judith Reisman is our guest. Sexual Sabotage, available in major bookstores. The website is drjudithreisman.com. You're listening to The Fairness Doctrine, Left, Right, and Uncensored. Cyberstation. We'll be right back. Judith, please stay tight.
And now back to Chuck and Patrick. Chuck, take it away.
Thank you, Laws. Patrick, please continue.
Well, I was. What I'm trying to do here is tease out what's happening now with regard to this particular program that you're talking about. And like I say, that there are many funders of various kinds of scholarships, lectureships, programs, graduate students. Most of those are corporate, and I know this because I was part of my job at Georgia Tech was to get those people. I was asked to raise $2.5 million a piece for various professors. So I know what goes on. Although in the cases in which I was involved, in which we did bring in very large grants of that kind, one of the rules was that the donor could not dictate the curriculum. And in fact, there was a case at not in my school, but at USC, in which a Saudi prince put up $10 million for a professor, and then decided that he wanted to appoint the professor and dictate the curriculum, and USC said no and gave him his money back, which is usually what universities do.
It went to Georgetown.
We don't know that. What we know is that Georgetown got a grant for a professor there. We don't know what the conditions of that were. But because I don't want to malign Georgetown. But I want to know, do you have any idea what the conditions of the grant were, Judith?
Well, no, I don't anticipate that there were any significant conditions, because I believe that the pornography industry, as it is, and the people who are teaching at University of Minnesota and others, other colleges like this, are not in disagreement. I mean, so it's not a question of Sinclair or Adam and Eve or any of these people having to force Dr. Coleman and Joyce Elders and those people to, force them to teach their way. I believe they believe that way. It's sort of like hiring me if I was a member of the white supremacist organization and you believed in white supremacy and you would just hire me, and support me. There'd be no problem there. So the problem is more in the whole educational structure that we call human sexuality education, which is why I wrote the books I did, because the whole field of human sexuality education is a field that's been grounded in fraud and grounded in Kinsey's fraud and grounded in crimes against children, and nothing, of course, of that is ever taught within the human sexuality field, which tells you a great deal about it. In other words, I've gone through the curricula being used at Northridge and other universities, and if there was any effort at all to be honest about how they got their data, if there was any effort at all to be legitimate and to have an open position on these sexuality issues, it'd be different. But there isn't any, and so they do use the FUCK-orama to train their people because they believe it's good. They do hire only people who believe the way they believe. There is no one who can enter these fields, and I've interviewed people who started and had to drop it because unless you are part of their system or unless you're part of their propaganda structure, you're not going to work there. So I don't imagine that Adam and Eve or any of the pornographers or Candida Royale or Seekers, I don't imagine that they have to force their belief system on these teachers. I believe that it's all one. It's all in accord. It's just, it's as though you had
they all think alike.
The white supremacists. Yeah, I mean, teaching white supremacy and being funded by white supremacists.
Or you have corporate executives teaching in the Koch brothers lecture series. For our listeners, Northridge refers to Northridge, California, and there's a California State University at Northridge there. Mm-hmm. Well, since I don't know anything about the program, and we haven't heard from the people who actually teach in the program, I'm going to have to accept what you say, but hold it in abeyance until we actually hear from the people who teach in the program or see some proof that what you're saying is actually the way it is.
Patrick, can I just ask you a brief question?
Yeah, sure. Right.
Do you think that the Koch brothers endowed chair might be oriented toward teaching people about the benefits of capitalism?
Actually, it's not an endowed chair. It's a support for graduate students.
Okay, do you think that
they
that's
might
support?
frame it that way, and other people might.
Well, what do you think? I'm asking you, Patrick O'Heffernan, someone who's been involved in this. Do you think that the Koch brothers, when they contribute to a school or a department, that encourages the teaching of capitalism?
Since I don't know exactly.
Do you have an opinion, Patrick?
Capitalism.
Well, you've made the accusation already twice today on this show, so
it's not an accusation. It's a fact.
It's an opinion. No, you've expressed
they're funding a graduate
That's right,
program
but you've expressed the opinion that this is to promote what you called, quote, anti-democracy. So my question is to just clarify this. Since you seem to be claiming that when the Koch brothers, and by the way, I think you're right, contribute to a school to promote capitalism, that generally, even if it's not in the formal structure of the grant, which it's not, the result is going to be that that's what's going to be taught. And I would also add as an addendum that we had the professor who was funded at Georgetown University in the chair that was funded by the Saudis, and clearly he was pro-Saudi and he was pro-Islamic, a very fundamentalist Islamic position. I didn't say it was. I'm saying, but that is the result of it. And your contention earlier in this program on two occasions, once on this show and once in our first hour, seemed to indicate that that's your opinion with regard to the Koch brothers funding, that may not be part of the formal grant process, but that is the practical result. And if that is your opinion, you're right.
Yeah, probably. If it's when you say advancing capitalism, the support for capitalism, there's a lot of different interpretations of capitalism.
But the Koch brothers' interpretation is the one that's being promoted.
Well, corporations don't like capitalism because capitalism levels the playing field between just ordinary people and corporate elites. And of course, corporate elites like to be able to buy as many votes as they can, which is why they put millions of dollars into campaigns and so they can get their way, regardless of what the people want.
Well, whatever it is they
talk about capitalism, that might be what's going on.
Thank you, Patrick.
But
however they interpret
whether or not it is or isn't, because I don't have the facts in front of me.
Yeah, but your opinion is that however they interpret the meaning of capitalism, that is due to their contributions, and you've said it already twice on this show. Yeah. We could go back and listen to the tapes.
Yeah, no, you're right, yeah.
So then why would you not say that in the case of pornographers funding various university programs?
I don't know that they are or not. I'm taking Judith's word on it that they are.
But you seem to be drawing you seem to be drawing a rather absolute sounding opinion on that with regard to the Koch brothers when you don't know that either.
I just want to point out to our audience that what she's talking about is not unusual. Corporations of all kinds fund all kinds of education. In fact, corporate penetration into the American university system is actually getting a little bit out of hand, whether it's coming from the pornography industry or the oil industry.
Fine, but we're talking here about pornography, Patrick.
You see tens of millions of dollars of corporate money being used to train students, to support faculty, to pay for research that supports corporate PR positions. I think it's a little too much.
Yeah, you're getting
right
off
now,
the subject because we're talking here about specifically
if I
pornography.
may interrupt, gentlemen,
Please.
I think what we're talking about here is we are talking about pornography is a corporate organization.
Exactly.
Pornographers are a massive corporation. They are, I don't know what the billions are right now, but they certainly are doing quite well. And as a result, they are buying votes, and they are shaping our public policy, and they are determining who is teaching in our schools. And the results in terms of our children do not appear to be particularly beneficial for them, because indeed every measure of sexual disorder is off the charts. And by the way, no, it's been going on, and I would tell you, I won that case in the Netherlands against Playboy. It's been going on since 1954, when Playboy started their promotion of children as viable sexual targets. And if I can win that case in the Netherlands, I could win that one in any place in the United States of America. So,
I hope you do.
Playboy was a corporation. Playboy is a corporation. It has spewed off millions, but many, many, many other corporations of similar, like themselves, and they are conducting a massive campaign to recruit our children into their belief system, and that campaign then funnels the big pharma corporations, because when our guys are dysfunctional, when they are impotent, which is growing like crazy today, not other things, but growing, but the impotence is increasing. When they are doing that sort of thing, and when they are unable to maintain their marriages, and when they are having every kind of STD in the world, then Big Pharma is making a fortune.
Viagra.
Fortune from abortion, making a fortune from the medications that are needed to deal with the vaccines that are given to the little children when they're tiny, because we don't want them to get the VDs that we're saying they're going to get if they're promiscuous, which they will be, because they're being trained by promiscuous people who believe in it.
Dr. Judith Reisman, thanks so much for joining us. DrJudithReisman.com. Sexual Sabotage is the book. Patrick, I'll talk to you Tuesday. Chuck Morse, The Fairness Doctrine. Have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judith.